Okay, episode 3 of Summoning Insight. Thorin here, senior esports content creator for on Gamers. And here with, I'm just going to quit doing that intro from now on. And here with Monty Cristo, caster for OGN, Masters, all that good shit. Coach of CLG. Okay, so for this episode, we obviously have to talk about IEM, right, Monty?
Of course, we haven't talked about that yet at all, and I am so down to have that discussion with you.
So what was your first impression of IEM? I mean, I remember seeing the paper, and on paper, it was all these names that are famous, Type A Assassins, World Elite, but it wasn't the real ones. So I was wondering, like, will this event suck? Will it be, like, underwhelming? What was your actual initial impression of IEM as a whole?
Well, I thought it was extremely exciting, but I thought it was extremely exciting because we rarely get to see international competition. And I was particularly excited because KT Bullets had had a lot of failures recently due to the roster changes and their very poor record in Masters, and they just didn't look like the team that was probably the second best team in the world right before the World Championships of last year. And also, KT Bullets, it's not really a secret, I love that team. I love watching them play. They're one of my favorite teams to cast just because they're so interesting and diverse in terms of strategies, although they were playing pretty badly before that, so I was excited to see how they were going to do. Of course, it was a tournament with not a lot of powerful teams at the moment. In fact, going into that event, I think there's a strong argument to be made that none of the top 10 teams in the world were there. I think you could say that none of
Gambit, maybe?
Maybe Gambit, but
that might be the only questionable one, though, I think.
But you have to rank Gambit somewhere between 8 and 10. So top 8 teams, maybe sure. Not. And of course, you know, we had seen Fnatic was in a bit of a slump. World Elite wasn't looking so good because at the beginning of LPL, we look at World Elite and we say, wow, this team has two 2-0 wins, but they were against Positive Energy and Royal, and we were waiting because OMG had 2-0 wins against the same team, so we were kind of waiting for that WE OMG, and when that happened, OMG just wrecked them with Support LeBlanc 2 games in a row, and from then on I was like, oh, well, because the thing about LPL was when the season started, we really didn't know how good any of the teams were. So we had to wait for a bit to see them play each other, and then we had a better idea because Positive Energy and Royal really got hit hard by all the roster changes, as it turns out. And then TPA, of course, was 10-0 in GPL, but what the hell does that ever mean, right? It's not the strongest region. And then we had Cloud9, who was very consistent in North America, currently has a 75% win rate in NA, is firmly number 2 and still vying for number 1 in the North American LCS. So it was very interesting to me to see a team like the KT Bullets who had undergone a roster change. And it's unfortunate that every time we see the Bullets play internationally, they've like immediately had a roster change. Happened last time too when they had just acquired InSec. So bit interesting. Maybe not the highest skill. Some of the games were sloppy, and like we're talking about, we didn't see the top Chinese teams there. We didn't see really the cream of the crop Korean teams there, or so it appears so far this season. But KT Bullets, I think, exceeded expectations. I thought Gambit was going to win. But KT Bullets had 2 weeks of training where they didn't have to play in Korea, so it looks like they buckled down, and they have a good practice partner in the KT Arrows for sure. So, yeah, KT Bullets roll through the tournament, don't lose a game.
So let's start on KT Bullets then, because the fact that they didn't lose a single game is really startling. Okay, so you could say in the Gambit series there were a few that were close. Maybe some of those could have gone the other way. But other than that, they were pretty dominant. So here's the problem. Everyone before the tournament, like you and I, who were saying, oh, KT aren't very good, so they might even do really badly here. If they now completely dominate the whole tournament, people are going to want to go the other way because they don't want to get their feelings hurt about Gambit and Fnatic losing and be like, oh, in that case, maybe we were wrong. Maybe KT Bullets is much, much better than we thought they were. Whereabouts in that spectrum are you at the moment, do you think?
Probably somewhere in the middle. I think KT Bullets did do a lot of work, and I also think that they prepared really well. And the thing about it is, actually, before we saw the KT Bullets play that support Karma and like do all this Shen craziness and, you know, have that 2v1 in the mid lane, actually earlier that same night, the KT Arrows did that same strategy in Korea in a game that I was casting. So it was very clear that the KT organization has been running like a lot of support karma, and they have this very strange playstyle right now. Korea was also ahead on changing to Kha'Zix R evolution first in the jungle and prioritizing those picks. So I think that KT just had more appropriate strategies, and it was the organization itself. Both KT teams were using them on different continents like the same time. So that was pretty fun to see, actually. And they were winning in both regions at the same time as well. So I think part of it was KT was playing a style that no one had ever seen before. Both KT organizations simultaneously in different tournaments were playing this new style, and they played it. The KT played it again tonight and won their first game against Samsung Blue with the karma and the craziness with the duo mid and all this other shenanigans that they've been pulling. But they also improved significantly. Insec looks more comfortable in the jungle now for sure, even though he hasn't played that position since May of last year. So I think they had the right power picks for the patch, and I think they had an unpredictable strategy that they were using in that tournament.
So here's something to characterize KTB. Here's something people aren't going to like who are from NA. But let's go back in our minds to season 3 World Championship, okay? When Cloud9 lost to Fnatic, a lot of people's complaint, okay, was like, well, you can't really count that. That's not indicative of their level because, you know, Cloud9 haven't competed internationally. You know, they've only had a season together. Well, KTB have only ever been to one tournament outside of Korea, which was that MLG Invitational, which is well over a year before.
And they've only ever played against 2 Western teams, Gambit and Curse, ever. And
they've just changed players. It's not even like they've just had a season, and yet they rolled this whole tournament. So this is why
they've changed Insec to a position he hasn't played professionally in over a year, despite the fact that, of course, he's a great jungler. That's why he was an All-Stars. Clearly, this is where he was meant to be. But Leopard had never played internationally at all before. And indeed, Leopard wasn't even a starter top laner in Korea before, right? So we're not talking about one of the kind of big top lane names, even in a region that's known for top laners. And he played, in fact, he and Score were really the standouts, I think, of that tournament. Sure, Insec had great games on Kha'Zix and Lee Sin, but he also knew ahead of everybody else how to play like Kha'Zix. Was much more up on the patch, and he did great. But Leopard, for his first like big showing, was very impressive in the top lane.
But I think that just shows how, like, basically the reason why I set it up like that is because it's not that KTB were some monster team. Like, that's still very much up in the air. In fact, it looked to me like, okay, so the one thing we said coming into this tournament that KTB will have, okay, is strong laning. Because, like, some of those players are just very good laners. And on top of that, I think everyone should have known, even if Insec hasn't played jungle, like, come on, guy, that guy's mechanics are fucking ridiculous. He could not know what to do, but he'd still be so good, he could potentially get himself out of trouble, you know. And I think you saw it in this tournament. Like, there were times when, like, it was like the old Insec, people just couldn't catch him. Like, he could just escape everything. He perfectly hit every single escape. And just, you know, you couldn't catch him out. Which is the one thing you can do as Insec is you hope that he makes a mistake and you catch him, you know. The thing about this team was, I don't think they had any secret strategies. I think that, like, this just shows how strong individual players can be in Korea. Like, the level of individual laning and the level of mechanics on the best players is just nuts. Because they looked like a mixed team. Like, I actually thought they were just playing off a lot of the old synergy they must have had when they had those 4 players in those positions the year before. They couldn't have it very much practice, but they knew roughly, like, what he's going to do, what I'm going to do. Because in team fights, they were really good. Rotations were pretty good in general. They knew how to take towers at the right time. They knew when to back off. Like, you'd have thought, if you hadn't have known the context, like, this is a really practiced team. They've been together for a few months. Like, that wasn't the case at all. I think this sort of showed that the Western teams are a little bit weak right now in some of those areas. You know, like, either you have a team like Cloud9 who have the rotations and they're intelligent, but they don't have the strong laners and they don't have the strong individual players, or you have a team like Fnatic who have all the talent, but at the moment they don't have the decision making, or you have a team like Gambit would just weird this time. We'll get onto that in a minute.
They were weird. I don't even know what the hell was going on with Genja's builds this tournament. Obviously, they've been criticized pretty significantly, but they were bad.
So overall, though, for KTB, I mean, first of all, we have to say, you know, all the people there's been a debate over the last year. Whenever anyone said Insect should come back to the jungle, people would always say, no, but Cacao is better than him. And, it's better to have both of them in one team. Like, I always secretly thought, like, I want to see Insect back there again. This kind of proves to me that, like,
me too.
He has to be in the jungle, man. Come on.
Well, he just was inconsistent in the top lane. That's the thing. And Leopard appears so far, we have a limited sample size, but from IEM and from watching him tonight, he's just a consistent top laner. He seems to have no trouble. He has a good mix of champions. He can play Ryze. He can play these bruisers. So I'm impressed by Leopard so far. And Insect is just such a strange jungler. He's so aggressive. He's a major initiation jungler, even on Assassins, as we saw with his Kha'Zix. He loves flanking. He loves getting into the back lines via, tricky angles and all this other stuff. He's a weird jungle player. And so I think he requires like special preparation in a way that very few junglers do. Meteos is another one that requires special preparation because he has a lot more items than many junglers tend to have.
What I thought was funny about the Insect thing is when Insect started doing these games on Kha'Zix, people did the standard thing that they do, okay? I've noticed League of Legends fans all want to believe that they can be the expert, okay? And so, if you lose against Kassadin, they're like, why would you not ban Kassadin? I know that you're always supposed to do it, but they never give the reason why, okay? Well, here's the thing. If you're starting to use 1 or 2 bans on the jungler of KTB, well, then Score's loving that, Ryu's loving that. How are you going to use those bans? There's only 3 bans, guys.
Exactly. And, you have to have the Kassadin ban right now if you're on purple side.
Exactly.
And we saw, the KT Bullets wreck with Kassadin when they managed to get it, which is actually surprising because Ryu traditionally has been a very bad Kassadin player. So he played a lot better this tournament in that regard. But you just have to kind of pick your poison here because, okay, you ban Kha'Zix, so then Insect gets Lee Sin. Oh, you use 2 jungle bans? Oh, well, then KT Bullets gets Sivir and Lulu or LeBlanc or something that they're really good at playing. You can't, there just aren't enough bans. You have to just know how to play against this shit.
Well, it's like you said, you have to pick your poison. You have to pick the one that, okay, for someone else, if you let Insect have Kha'Zix, maybe that is game over. But maybe for my team, I can handle that, and I'd rather take away the AD carry or the mid so that my play in that position, he either is even or he's going to win his lane. That's what people forget when they do this analysis in hindsight. You can't just wait till the game's over, then see who fucking won and go, oh, I'd have banned that champion. Like, that's fucking garbage. The analysis is supposed to hold before the game as well,
And you'll notice at IEM that KT Bullets pretty much exclusively played with either Sivir or Karma. They were very reliant on these global speed boosts or these like team-wide speed boosts. And guess what? The game they lost tonight, they didn't play Sivir or Karma. And from an analyst perspective, when they're constantly prioritizing all these champions that they use to create speed to just make picks, which I was talking about in their game with Samsung Blue today that they lost. And in fact, there were no bans against those champions, but they also didn't pick them. And then the KT Bullets went down. So the KT teams have just been like, don't get Sivir, we take Karma. Or we take Sivir and we don't take Karma. And so they were very reliant on these champions where they could have high mobility as 5 to just kind of catch you out of position very quickly. And so I think those would have been the better bans, actually, for the sake of this tournament.
So if we talk next about the top 2 European teams at this tournament, Gambit and Fnatic, I think the first thing I'd want to say on this topic is that just because Fnatic made the final doesn't mean they were the second best team here. Like, to me, I think Gambit actually had a better chance of winning this tournament than Fnatic did.
Yes.
Like, okay, on paper, it looks like, well, they made the final. Like, yeah, but I'm not sure it works like that entirely, guys. Like, those groups,
of course,
Fnatic's group were fucking garbage. They had easily the weakest group.
Just like Champions Winter, we saw KT Bullets and SK Telecom hit each other in the semifinals, and KT Bullets played the best series, even though they also lost 0-3 to SK Telecom, but they played the closer games, and they played better, and they actually had leads in some of those games, whereas Ozone just got put in the dumpster in the finals, right? So,
which is pretty much what happened here, because again, okay, KT won 2-0 over Gambit, they won 3-0 over Fnatic. The Gambit series was way closer. I mean, actually, what's funny is Gambit, this really was like a classic Gambit clutch play. They weren't on their absolute peak game. You could tell by the way they got fucking, like Alex Sitch got dumpstered by that morning guy from TPA. Like, who the fuck saw that coming? Gambit as a whole didn't look actually that strong. They were just like edging games out. Like, actually, Alex Sitch is the player I'd bring out for Gambit here, because aside from maybe that one game against KTB, he looked uncharacteristically weak. Usually Alex, his strength is that, okay, even if some European mid laners can beat him, his strength internationally is always really good. Like, he seems to know how to play people. He looked like really kind of a bit weak at times this tournament. What did you think?
I think he did too. And I also think that Ryu is not playing great right now either. So to have these, you know, to have Ryu in that kind of position over Alex was quite a surprise to me, because Ryu has been just destroyed. I mean, Nagne in their game against Najin Blacksword, just, oh my God, it was an ugly game. Ryu, I think, had a .33 KDA against Nagne, and Ryu was playing LeBlanc, which is one of his best champions, so not good. But
another
course,
player, though.
That's just one game. That's just one game. But they also lost to I Am Number 1 and I Am Number 2, who, by most standards, are thoroughly middle-of-the-pack teams in Korea in Masters. And, of course, that was right after their switch. The first game against Blacksword was when they had Zero in jungle, and Zero created no pressure the entire game. So I'm sure that, obviously, that hurt Ryu quite a bit as well. But... well, we'll see. We'll see how KT Bullets do, but they already split 1-1 with Samsung Blue, and there's a real threat that against Blue and Najin Sword that they may not even make it out of their group this time, because both of those teams are maybe a little bit better than the KT Bullets are right now.
Because for me, whenever Gambit are at their peak, I always can tell, because it's always when Diamond and Alex are like the spearheads. They're the ones who are top, doing really great. Because once they're in place, the rest of their team, you've got luxury. You know, now Darian can do whatever he wants. Genja can have a good game, and it just puts you over the top. Diamond also looked a bit weird this tournament. He didn't play badly, because come on, it's Diamond. Like, he never was going to play absolute crap. But we all wanted to see Diamond Prox versus Insect. Like, we want round 2 of this matchup. Diamond Prox didn't really show up to this matchup in this particular one, I didn't think. What did you think?
I just think Gambit looked like their communication just wasn't very good in the games. It just, I think you can see it too, not only in the play of Alex Ich and Diamond and their coordination, but just in terms of what I touched on this earlier, but Genja's builds. It's like his lack of Last Whisper has been criticized against all this armor that the KT Bullets were stacking, and that's a legitimate criticism. It just seems like none of the players are actually talking to each other about what the hell they're doing. And what they need. It's almost like they don't know what they need to do to win the game, and they're not actually talking through their win conditions or anything like that. So I don't know what's going on with Gambit right now, and they just seem to lack that focus, where they typically have this kind of laser focus about, this is how we're going to win the game, and maybe we need this crazy build this game, but they'll do something unorthodox that is situationally appropriate. And this game, they just did things that were totally situationally inappropriate. It was almost as if they weren't talking to each other about how they were going to win the games.
Okay, but I want to talk about this topic, actually, because I'm like I love Genja. I think he's fucking awesome. I even sort of love how retarded he is with some of his builds. Like, that almost adds to the charm, because if you think about it, let me frame
his Trinity Force Kog'Maw at Worlds is actually successful, even though on paper it's a trash build.
This is the question I asked Doublelift in my interview with him, okay? So Doublelift, because he has exactly the opposite AD philosophy to how to play the position, like you carry, you get attack damage, and you try to get in the fight and do it, whereas the opposite to the Genja marksman style of, like, I'm just another player, I have no peel, I have to just kill and never get in the range of being killed myself. Because they're so worlds apart, Doublelift obviously thinks Genja is trash, okay? So I said to Doublelift, okay, so you're telling me he builds wrong, his mechanics aren't even that good, sometimes he makes mistakes being too passive in lane. How is he not getting dumpstered every time in lane? How is his team not losing every time because of him? And Doublelift was sort of like, but no, he's bad. Like, he had no, that's the thing. Genja has a really retarded, fucked up style, but it's like he's the only person in the world who could play that style. And he is. In some games here, he was amazing. Like, actually, versus World Elite, that game, he went fucking nuts on Wei Zhao, who's like, come on, it's Wei Zhao, dude. And then even the KT Bullets games, all those times where they would try to dive bottom lane and he would, like, somehow get, like, kills as he was like, he was really good this tournament. He might have built weird shit, but his play was fucking awesome for what people think of his skill set as.
Right, but when you look at those builds and you realize that even though he did have a pretty good tournament, if he had built differently, that Gambit may have been actually able to win some pretty critical fights and what have you. So, I mean, I think there's still criticism to be had about the decision making that went down. But yeah, I think that I was surprised by Gambit because they usually step up, and it was so funny too because after I predicted Gambit to win, they lose that first game, and then my Twitter's like on fire with like, oh man, it's like what the hell? They lost one game. They're not even out of the tournament yet.
Oh, Gambit, by the way, I should also point out
Gambit has not made the round of 4. They have not made the semifinals in one tournament in their history. Season 3 World Championship. One.
And that was without Edward. So with Edward again, they've never failed to make top 4 every time. Dude, people think people will talk like, "Oh, you're a fanboy if you think Gambit are going to do well." I'm just like, when have they never not done well? I mean, I'm just waiting for you guys when your evidence comes in because I've got all this stack over here of like all of history, and you've got what like that. Well, they lost to Rockout like 2 weeks ago, and LCS. Oh, great, yeah, congrats, yeah. Anyway, so the other team to talk about obviously Fnatic. Now it's going to look strange here because Fnatic came second, and yet I don't think Fnatic were very good in this tournament. I think they looked good against Cloud9. Everyone else, I was like, what the fuck's going on here, Fnatic? Like, when they lost to IG, I was like, Jesus, I didn't know it was this bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, IG, that's the thing, is that IG as a team is very strong in the laning phase, but I don't know what's going on with IG, but they like crush their lanes, and then they suffer like some sort of mental breakdown in mid-game rotations, and then just... I mean, their game against the IG, well, we're talking about Fnatic. We won't talk about IG versus the Bullets. But, I mean, IG had a big advantage that they decided just to toss right out the window. So, but yeah, same thing. Same story for IG the entire tournament. Same story with IG in China right now. They had, for example, leads on EDG in their games with them. And then they just are experts at letting people back into the game after crushing in lane. So, it's just kind of the story right there. And it is a bit surprising that I was actually surprised that Fnatic was able to beat Cloud9, considering that Cloud9, we talk about them having a weaker laning phase, but they did very well against TPA and World Elite. And when the Chinese teams are known for having strong laning phases, that was an impressive showing by them. So I'm not exactly sure what happened with Cloud9 between kind of day 1 and day 2, because they did not look as decisive against Fnatic either. But yeah, Fnatic actually kind of came together against Cloud9 and then absolutely folded against the KT Bullets.
Yeah, the thing with Fnatic was, okay, so in episode 1 was where we broke down Fnatic and what their problems are when they were in the losing streak. Okay, after watching them more and more, I think you have to put the blame onto Xpeke and Cyanide, because they're the two players who every time I see them lose badly just aren't doing anything. Xpeke in particular has very average games now, whereas like Reckless, sometimes they lose and he plays about as well as you could hope he could play, you know. I can't really blame him that much. Soaz, okay, a bit up and down, but he still has good games. It really, for me, it's Xpeke and Cyanide are like Cyanide did nothing against Insec in that series in the finals. Like I don't know how they thought they were going to win. And then Xpeke, come on, people who haven't seen Ryu play outside of Korea don't understand how good he is, okay? So they all tell you, no, the best mid laners are still like Xpeke, Alexic, Bjergsen. Come on, mate. Ryu held it over Alexic and Xpeke in 5 straight games. Like, what more do you want? You can't say that they had one bad game or whatever. This is 5 straight games. He was better than the best EU mid laners.
Yeah.
The guy's a beast.
Well, and like I said, he's been having trouble in Korea recently, but like it's part of that is jungle and mid synergy is so important right now, and obviously they were having like this revolving door of junglers during Masters, so it's clearly better now. So he is getting more support from the jungle. But yeah, I think Ryu played relatively well overall at IEM, and he certainly did well against Xpeke and Alexic overall, and he's just a solid player. Now, he didn't have to play mid lane that entire time, right? Because sometimes the KT Bullets were setting their duo into mid, and he was off at a side lane just farming his Gragas. So I think their strategies and they intentionally make lane matchups sometimes for Ryu where it's quite easy for him. And they did it again tonight when they sent him as Lulu into a side lane. The other thing that I want to say about Fnatic, though, is that Fnatic sometimes they're picking bans. I don't remember if you remember the game at Worlds where they like randomly picked Yorick in their first game, and it was like a terrible pick for their team composition. They promptly lost to Vulcan. They last picked Yorick, and I was like, no. But the Lulu top, just stop it. Just stop it. You guys, like, Fnatic's a good team. If they would just play meta and stop like screwing around with trying to be tricky with all these picks, they just perform better. And so kind of their first few games, I think really got hampered by their pick and ban phase.
I think that's a sign that they have some insecurity themselves, though, that they feel like they need some weird gimmick or they need to do something. Because they're such a... Dude, when I see the talent that their team has, I'm like, no, all you guys need to do is focus on the fundamentals. If you can get the fundamentals on, you're going to be really good. The rest, worry about that later, you know. If anything, trying this tricky stuff holds you back. Because then when it works, you're going to keep going with that and you're going to be inconsistent because then you can't consistently do weird stuff every time.
Well, I was watching your interview with Soaz when you asked him like if the tanky meta is still like here in a year, and it's obvious that he hates that as a player. Yeah. But the thing is that the meta, there are certain powerful picks right now, and you just have to shut up and play them if you want to get a W on your record and get some money, right? And just you have to suck it up and play that, even if you don't like it. And Soaz is a very good player, and I just think that Fnatic as a whole performs better when they take the meta picks, and when they start doing crazy stuff, they lose to teams that they really, really should beat.
So I actually have a point. I can give people some insight here because I have another interview that's coming out that hasn't been released yet, which is with Zoro. And in Europe, people still consider him the best top laner, okay? Because he used to be very good also when it was like you could play Assassin's top lane in LCS Summer, but he's probably the one guy who was really good at that point at top, who transitioned out of Europe and is amazing at the Renekton's, these sort of the meta picks now. He's somehow found a way to transition when everyone else is just complaining. Whereas a lot of the people who are doing well now at top lane in Europe is people like Youngbuck who always did play the Renekton type things. So they're in vogue right now. And so I tried to figure out in the process of the interview with Zoro, like how is he being so good in this area where everyone else is saying you can't do it, okay? And he told me essentially, like you have to have the mindset that when I'm playing with Renekton or when I'm playing with Shyvana, I'm not going to snowball the lane. I'm not going to kill the enemy. I'm not going to carry the game. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take tiny little advantages that don't look like much. So think about when two big tanks hit each other. You know they know they can't kill each other, so they think, oh, who cares how much damage he does to me? I'll just get this farm here and I keep going. Instead, the Zoro approach is like, okay, I'm still going to think of it like a lane where I have to trade properly and I can't take too much damage, and I'm still going to figure out like which CS to take to get a little bit extra farm. And the whole point is he's never going to have a 1v9 impact on the game, but he is going to have a tiny little advantage over that guy when he's in the team fight, or he's going to have a little bit more health when a team fight comes. And so someone like Soaz, the reason why I'm using this example now is someone like Soaz could totally do that. Soaz is amazing at trading in the lane, at knowing what a champion can do, but he still wants to do that. To him, the fun is to carry the game, is to snowball the lane, is to kill that guy. If he could actually transition his mindset to like, okay, I can't do that, but there's still a way to beat this guy. Okay, it's not going to be flashy, I'm not going to get a lot of fun out of it, but I'm going to beat this guy in my lane. He could give Fnatic such an advantage in almost every game, right?
I totally agree with you, and that's like a top laner syndrome, right? That persists, especially among players that have been playing the game for a long, long time, that have seen the era of the carry top laner, where like Shy would come in on Jax and absolutely destroy everybody, or these kind of situations. But that's not where the top lane is right now, and so you really do have to have that mindset. And it's when you get greedy in the top lane, and because if you do give up a kill in the top lane, it's like a disaster, right? At this point, where it's so hard to do that if you actually do overplay your hand even just a little bit, unless you're playing something like Rise where you can die multiple times and you're still going to carry the game in the late game. So maybe we're seeing a return to that more style of play now. We've seen Kennen here in Korea as well do very well in lanes against Shyvana and stuff like that. But until that actually happens and we get to the next like stage of top lane meta, you really do have to play that way right now. And I couldn't agree more with you about your assessment of that situation and the top laner attitude. And a lot of top laners, like, they are kind of divas in that way about, we want to play these big bruisers. Like, we're on the island, we're in this dueling lane where it's just me and this other guy, and we're going to farm up. It's just mano y mano. We're going to duke it out, and then one of us is going to come out ahead, and then we're going to explode out of the top lane, and then I'm just going to kill everybody. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that anymore, buddy.
No, they all still live in that world. That's why I always describe, like in my interview with Soaz, the wet dream for every top laner is to be Flame in like March of 2013, and every game you're playing Kennen, you're 50 CS up, everyone's going, wow, that other top lane is shit, he's getting destroyed, and you're like, yes, I am God in the top lane. Like, that's gone. That window is gone, guys. Like, maybe we can sort of get that back and have a few of those champs back, but I'm not sure you can keep living in that fantasy world. At that point, that world is like, in a cartoon where they'll have like the character it'll live in a really dreary normal city, and there'll be that like billboard for like go on holiday to Hawaii, and it'll be like the girl on the beach with the beach ball, and that's like his dream of what a perfect holiday would look like. But it would never look like that if you actually went there. That's the dream of what it would be like. That's what our top laners are stuck in, is this dreary Watchmen type world that's harsh, and they're dreaming of going on this wonderful vacation. It's not going to happen, guys. You have to live in reality. It's a grimy world, dog eat dog.
And if you look at the top laners that are very successful now in Korea and the teams that are doing well, their top laners are very workmanlike in their attitude. They're not the big flashy stars, even though Flame is still a great player. Sometimes the deep freezing tactics of Blaze and the emphasis on Flame getting all that farm actually hurts Blaze even to this day, even though they're a top team in Korea and they're doing better, and they're slowly shedding this like, we're just going to farm forever, and they're playing a more aggressive early game style. But the thing is that map pressure in the current meta is so important, especially with the sieging AD carries and the wave clear AD carries that we have right now, that rapid rotations, if you're just sitting there farming for 10 minutes, like, they're just going to take all your towers and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to be much more aggressive with how you push out the lane, how you're not freezing as much, generally speaking. It's a different era now. It's a different era.
Okay, so another team to talk about in this tournament was Cloud9. We touched on them a little bit before. The funny thing is, I think this tournament actually exposed the key problem of Cloud9, which we all knew, which is not strong enough individual players. The whole point is, when they play in NA, they don't have to have stronger individual players because they're so much ahead of most teams in strategical elements.
They're the best team in NA in terms of rotation.
As long as they don't get killed completely in laning phase. As long as they survive a little bit, they will rotate better. Like, dude, in this tournament, their rotations were great. I thought they were awesome versus Fnatic. There was a lot of times where Fnatic only won by actually outskilling them in a team fight, or like someone going crazy and hitting an ultimate. Otherwise, Cloud9, strategically, they were the better team in that series. I thought Cloud9 did great, but the problem is, to me, they hit the ceiling. Like, I don't know what more they could have done to do better in this tournament. Like, I mean, they already got a favor that Taipei Assassins beat Gambit, and so they didn't have to play Gambit in the upper bracket of the group stage. Like, I think Gambit would have probably beaten them. Huge props to beating World Elite, because I thought World Elite, okay, is going to outlane them, and then game over at that point, But
yeah, I thought so too. Yeah.
So yeah, listen, Cloud9, great sort of tournament. I'm a fan of them. I like to watch them play. They're a cool team to watch.
Yeah, they're very smart, and I think they definitely exceeded my expectations as well. I think that they did very well in lanes versus World Elite, which to me was impressive. But even so, I agree that still individually their players are not, their laning phases is not strong enough to compete with teams, because with like top teams in the world, because yeah, sure, in NA that works where the other teams just aren't quite as savvy strategically, but when you start hitting teams who both have strong laners and are as good as you strategically, clearly you're at a pretty significant disadvantage. I do think that I wish there are a couple matchups that I wish we could have seen. I really wish we could have seen Cloud9 versus the KT Bullets, and actually, I really wish we could have seen IG versus Cloud9, because IG has such strong lanes. I would have been very curious to see if IG won the laning phase, if Cloud9 was able to come back from that.
Well, especially because let's not fuck around. IG is a bad team for exactly the opposite reason why Cloud9 are good.
Yes.
They have super strong laning, and then as soon as they get out of that, they're fucking terrible at decision making, at grouping, at rotating, everything. They're wrong.
But the hierarchy right now, interestingly, in League of Legends, is that actually good macro decision making and strategy is more important than good laning. And I think this is like perfectly encapsulated in IG, who have very strong lanes, yet they're still like, a bottom team in China right now. And Cloud9, even though like you could argue it's a weaker region in NA, they have good enough lanes, and they have just superb strategy, macro strategy, and decision making. And so I just think that element of the game right now is the most important, because that's what separates professional tier play from solo queue, right? That's the biggest difference, is when you actually have to use teamwork and talk and make make decisions about how you're going to win the game with your composition as opposed to how you're just going to win your lane.
I mean, you could even make the case that if you wanted to get a bad team that on paper, this is the bad team that could beat Cloud9, I would pick IG, because think about how their team is set up. The best players on the team are the top laner, PDD, really strong laner,
and the
mid
bottom
laner, Zitai, the bottom laner, exactly, and then even their jungler is like underratedly good. So it's not like he's going to get smashed by Meteor. So actually, they would be a good like invert. They're like a Bizarro Cloud9.
Yeah. I know. That's why I really wanted to see that matchup. Was I felt that was like a very interesting, on paper, conceptual matchup, and I would have enjoyed to having watched that. But maybe I'd actually be interested. I don't know if IG and Cloud9 scrimmed at all, though. Maybe I'll ask Cloud9 if they had that opportunity to practice, because they were in opposite groups. So presumably, maybe they would have scrimmed before the tournament started. I would have been interested to hear how that turned out for them. Also,
you said Cloud9 versus KT Bullets. I think KT Bullets would have killed Cloud9. I think it would have been a rampage, because the thing is, KT Bullets had great rotations for not even having a solid team. So I think they're going to be at least match up in that area. And come on, how the fuck could Sneaky lane against Score? How could Balls actually survive against even Leopard? Like, looked like he was pretty strong this tournament. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing in all the matchups. Like,
and they had matchups prepared too, right? And Balls' best champion is Renekton, and KT Bullets was sitting there with Shen and Ryze just waiting for him. So they would have totally let Balls play Renekton and then just dumpstered him in the laning phase.
One thing to say about Cloud9 as well. I think, everyone who tried to convince me at the beginning of this season, no, you've been underrating High. It's not Meteos that's the individual star. He is like an individual star, but High is a star mid laner, guys. Because when you say star to me, I think that means, I can take that player and I can put him against the best in the world at his position, and he'll at least do well, or he'll compete. I think we've seen now, High is not at that level internationally. Within the context of his team, he plays a great game. But you saw here, he had problems against an Expeke, who himself is in like one of the worst slumps of his career. I didn't think High was anything super special in this tournament. In fact, if anything, I think his play this season has been one of the downsides for Cloud9 that made them not quite as good as they seemed last year. What do you think of High overall? You remember at the beginning of the season, people were trying to make out like, no, High will really give Bjergsen a run for his money, and Link, they'll all be battling High. He'll be right in the mix. Like, I think that ship sailed, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think High is just stronger on assassin champions, generally speaking. And I don't think he has a highly versatile play style in terms of being able to play assassins and kind of more traditional mages at a top level. So I think that on certain champions, he's pretty good. But on kind of in the big picture, I think he lacks some depth as a player. So there are certain picks you can force him onto, or certain matchups that he doesn't do quite so well in. It's interesting to think about the North American mid laners right now, because for me, Link is a good player too. But while Link is kind of like a jack of all trades, he's not like, he doesn't have like the same expertise in certain roles, but his champion pool is fucking enormous, right? Like, this guy can just like come in and play, at least in the NALCS, on a wide variety of roles and still do okay. Assassins, traditional mages, blah, 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 blah. And so maybe he's not as good at certain champions as High is, but he's a lot more versatile strategically, so that we can play a wide variety of compositions with Link. And I think High is a little bit more limited in terms of the strategies that Cloud9 can play with him and his reliability in the laning phase.
Oh, another IEM topic that reminds me of KT winning was, so obviously Score was amazing on Sivir.
And
I wanted to just talk about this, which is that this tournament reminded me of how bullshit some of the cliches of League of Legends are. So, there's one cliche that's obviously true, which is Europe, a lot of good mid laners, and Korea, a lot of good top laners. Okay, these ones do still fit. China, a lot of good AD carries. The one that I've always thought is the most overrated in League of Legends history is, NA has really good AD carries. No. Korea has way more good AD carries than NA has. Let's not fuck around. I'll give you an example. I was once talking to someone who's very knowledgeable, a Korean player, and I won't mention his name because I didn't get clearance to say this. And he told me back in season 2, even when Doublelift was at his peak, that if you were to rank the best AD carries in the world, he would have put it like this. Say on a 10 out of 10 scale, Wei Zhao was a 10 at the time, okay? He'd have put like Prey from Najin Sword at like a 9, and then he'd have had like someone like an Imp around like an 8, and then 7 or 8 is where he'd have put Doublelift, who was the best NA one at the time. Now, he's meaning total package here, guys, not just mechanics or not just killing. He's meaning everything. How do you work in the team, decision-making, knowing what to do in the lane? And so his point is, even in the period when people think of NA having the best AD carries, already Korea and Asia were like equal or better. And I think if you look at Korea now, you could make the case. Most people wouldn't even put Score as a top 3 AD carry in Korea. They'd have Imp, they'd have Prey, they'd have Piglet. Those three are above him. So this might be the 4th or below best AD carry in Korea, and he looked amazing in this tournament. What do you see from that?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, it's Korea has really developed, I think, a lot of AD talent. When the Korean region was first out there, I think maybe you could have made a point for NA AD carries, but that was very early on in the Korean scene. Prey has been somewhat inconsistent, but he's looking better again now. And certainly when Sword was dominating Korea at the beginning of 2013, Prey was looking really strong. There are just tons of solid AD carries. Emperor from Blazed is quite good at the moment as well. Deft from Samsung Blue is also he's a really good AD carry.
If he was on a really good team, he would do damage, dude.
Violet on Incredible Miracle has shown a lot of talent recently too. So all positions in Korea are pretty deep. There're just a lot of professional teams here. So I mean, there's more chances to practice. There's 2 leagues going on currently. There's 16 teams in Champions. There are 14 teams in Masters. There's more depth to the scene because there's more.
I mean, hey, if you want to throw up a new name, how about that Bet Kyo guy, the one who's in IM2?
He's kind of bad in laning phase. That's the problem with him. But
yeah,
his
good
team
last
fighting
season.
is good. Well, we'll see. We'll see how he does. I mean, Paragon played instead of him tonight for IM2, and Paragon won MVP both games, and he had like a 24 KDA tonight across 2 games. So.
Because I think the problem is, I think that whole cliche really comes from when Frost were the best team. And so Frost obviously had a bad individual AD carry, even though he's actually awesome for the team. He's really good at picking and stuff. But because he had the bad one, and people would look at it like, oh, well, if that's the best Korean team and that's their weakness, then that's the thing the region doesn't have. But I think if you went down the line, they always had talent at that position. Okay, so for this tournament, I think we've covered pretty much everything here. But this tournament leads neatly into a conversation that is very dear to Monte Cristo's heart. And it goes like this. Is it a myth? I'll ask it as though this is a real question, Monte Cristo. Like,
you're making me laugh.
Is it a myth that Koreans have dominated international tournaments historically? I put it to you.
So, I don't know. Like, the whole... I just don't even understand where this like delusion comes from. I mean, if you look at any game where Korea has really, because of the infrastructure here in the history of esports, if you look at any game where the Koreans have had a serious interest and have been doing like a lot of television broadcasts, they've been very dominant. And so I decided to kind of go through, a series of tournaments recently. Basically, I wanted to look at the entire history of League of Legends in terms of tournaments in which both a Western, meaning North American or European, and Korean teams have participated in, right? So this is not counting international tournaments solely between Asian teams, so Korea and Southeast Asia and China. There have been tournaments like that. Or counting times where Asian teams who are not Korean have competed against Western teams. So far in League of Legends, starting very famously with the MLG, well, actually starting in 2011 with WCG. So this was the first time a Korean team came to a Western country was in MLG Summer Arena.
No, WCG. Oh, where was WCG held in 2011?
I think it was
China. I think. Maybe could have been Korea. Actually, let me check.
No, that was it was in Korea. It was in Busan. It was in Busan in 2011.
Right. Okay, so you're right. The first Western trip was to...
Or not in Chengdu, in Kunshan, and then Kunshan again in 2013. So the first Korean team to hit a Western country was Blaze in August of 2012 at the MLG Summer Arena. But before that, okay, so first tournament, we're going to go through them all. There are 16 tournaments where this has happened. First tournament was 2011 WCG, where Chicks Dig Elo won. They won WCG. Najin EM Fire, the original Najin roster, was knocked out by Gameberg, the Polish team, in a 2-1 victory early on in the bracket stage. Gameberg contained many of the members of MYM.
Yeah.
So this was also before Korea actually had a League of Legends server. That has to be put out there too. So these were all the guys who were playing on NA with 150 ping from Seoul at the time. So American team wins, right? So then we go through, and then the next time was in 2012, the OGN Invitational, where Frost 2-0'd CLG. And then we had a couple of seasons of champions where Western teams played, including CLG, making the finals. So the tournaments are 2011 WCG, 2012 OGN Invitational, Champion Spring, MLG Summer Arena, Champion Summer, Season 2 Worlds, MLG Fall Championship, IPL 5, IEM Cologne, IEM Katowice, IEM Sao Paulo, IEM World Championship from last year, MLG Dallas, Season 3 Worlds, WCG 2013, and IEM Worlds this year. The statistics of these tournaments are, in 12 of these 16 tournaments, a Korean team has won. In 14 of 16 of these tournaments, an Asian team has won, with TPA winning Season 2 Worlds and WE winning IPL 5. And 2 of 16 tournaments, a Western team winning. 2011, Chicks Dig Elo, WCG, and IEM Katowice, where Gambit beat both Blaze and Frost in 2013. Korean teams have won 75% of the tournaments that they have competed in against Western teams. And
by the way, it's worth throwing in there that some of those tournaments, okay, think of the IM Cologne one where you had Fnatic, you had CLG EU, and the Korean teams was the SK Telecom with Reapered, who were had 2 weeks of practice, and the bad CJ Entus with Insec. So it's not like it was the absolute, it's not like Frost and Blaze came there and won it. Some of these tournaments are being won by teams who aren't even the best in Korea, and they come over.
And also, it's worth mentioning that at these tournaments as well, typically Korean teams are in the minority compared to Western teams, where there is only maybe 1 or 2 Korean teams there. Or, for example, at Season 3 Worlds, there are 3 Korean teams, but 6 NA and EU teams or something like that, right? So, yeah. So it's like the odds are even longer, right? Typically speaking, it's not like it's a stacked. There's 8 Korean teams at these tournaments.
But that adds to the dominance that it's
except for of course the OGN Invitational and some of these, champions where it was mostly. But for the majority of these tournaments, that wasn't true.
I mean, another one I could bring up is when Blaze won the MLG Dallas at the end of 2012. That was where they had Shy as a stand-in, who wasn't even a player for their team. He was a player for Frost, and they still won the tournament. So it's not like the OGN champion every
Blaze and Najin Sword anyway.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not like it's the OGN champion every season coming to this tournament and winning it. Because that, in fact, that's why I'm phrasing it like this. When people say that Korea doesn't dominate, they phrase it like this. No. SK Telecom dominates. And SK Telecom's so far above everyone that Monte Cristo goes way too far, and he says that the rest of Korea is really good, and they're just they'd be way down there. And, Ozone lost in Worlds. This is the way people always phrase it, okay? No, it's the opposite. It's that if you send Korean teams to tournaments, they will win nearly every single one. It doesn't matter if it's Gambit there. It doesn't matter if it's Fnatic there. It doesn't matter if it's CLGU. It doesn't matter if it's TSM. These were the best teams of the eras. They still all lost. In fact, the biggest problem, I think, of why people mischaracterize the Korean dominance is that they think of the key big tournaments that the other teams won. So, okay, Gambit won that IEM, if you remember, the Big World Championship in 2012. The only Asian team there, I think, was eHome, which is an okay Chinese team that had PDD on and no one else. There were no Korean teams there. There wasn't even World Elite because they turned down their invitation. They couldn't attend. So mainly they just beat NA and European teams. Then you have, okay, the 2 big tournaments in 2012, everyone remembers. Season 2 World Championship. Okay, props to TPA. They won that. It was a shock. Then you have IPL 5. Everyone remembers World Elite dominated. Now, the key thing to remember here is Even if you,
I also didn't
say,
cast.
Yeah.
I didn't put. Sorry to interrupt. I didn't put down all stars because I don't consider that like an actual
Sure, yeah.
representation of competition. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
But I mean, well, the point is, I can see how people could get confused if they're only looking at the biggest tournaments. Like, oh, well, Korea isn't winning all these tournaments. Even in those contexts, let's not fuck around. In the Season 2 World Championship, Frost still made the final. You know, even in these tournaments, the Korean teams are getting high. So the point is, you can dominate two ways. You can either dominate by winning all the tournaments. You can dominate by having the most top teams who place the highest. You can dominate by always finishing top 4, always finishing top 2. I think if you cut all these stats down, Korea is number 1 in every single one by like a long mile. So I don't think it's even debatable.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because even though Korean teams won 12 out of 16, they were in 14 out of 16 finals, including the Season 2 finals and the IEM World Championship final that Gambit won, right? The only tournaments that they weren't even in the finals in was 2011 WCG and IPL 5.
And IPL 5 was where they only sent Blaze. That was the only team.
The only.
We had no Frost, no Sword. So you could even make a case that the two tournaments they didn't do well in, maybe they didn't send their best team, or at the time Korea, okay, they weren't that strong in WCG 2011. During any of the time when Korea has been the best region, they've got the results to back up this claim that they're the best region, and not only the best region. Okay, here's the thing. We're not being unfair and saying Korea is automatically the best. There was a time, IPL 5, where World Elite was the best team in the world.
Agreed.
The key
100%.
point is, though, World Elite was number 1, but number 2, 3, and maybe like number 5, number 6 would have been Korean, you know, if you were being reasonable. So the point is, okay, Korea doesn't dominate by having the best team then, but they dominate by having the most top teams. And that's what I've always said. I use the argument that you made. It's not that Korea automatically will be the best. It's that if they embrace a game like they embrace Brood War, or they embraced League of Legends, so they go all into it, then I don't know if they'll have the best team, but I know that they'll have the most good teams or the most top players. That's what I can know. And I think historically, I don't think, if anyone wants a little task, try and make an argument where you argue against that fact. And I'd love to see what stats you come up with and what evidence you try and use. Because listen, go for it. If someone's out there, some NA fan who really thinks they've got it, let's see.
I would love to see that. But yeah, it's just like interesting because you know, we talk about it a lot, but I wanted to go back and actually take a look at the tournaments and actually like round up all of the numbers of all of the tournaments where a Korean team has played against Western teams and see what those actually were. There's obviously it's a little bit more back and forth depending on this. If you look at Korea and China in terms of Stars War and the Asian Indoor Games and some of these other tournaments, IEM Singapore, teams that like tournaments that just had Asian teams, it does get a little bit dicier, but usually there's a strong Chinese team present at these tournaments. Whereas, like, for example, the IEM World Championship, from looking at the LPL games to the point that we're at right now, it's extremely clear that OMG and EDG are the best teams in that league by a good margin. I mean, LGD is doing okay too, but OMG and EDG are kind of a cut above.
So this leads neatly into a topic that I actually wanted to address when we were discussing this, which was the topic of bandwagoning teams. Because I have two perfect examples. Anyone who's seen my Twitter over the last week will know what these examples are, okay? So when people bandwagon, one of the problems I've always criticized about the LCS format is that it's really uneven in terms of judging individual results. Because, for example, I could have played one opponent first, my team, okay? And then I play you second, but that might be your first game of the day. Now, in that scenario, I might be warmed up and I might beat you because I just prepped against this team. Or maybe I played the harder team first, and so I lost to them, but I learned something that helps me beat you in a game where you haven't had anything before. So my result against you can't be judged identically in terms of what I do and what you do. Now, the real reason why this principle works is because you play so few games in weeks of LCS overall that you have an entire week before you play your next games where people can go on Reddit and they can go, oh, they won 2 games in a row. Like, they're the better team in their Europe now. They're better than this team. That team's trash. They'll never be good. And then 4 weeks later, when the trend's reversed, they can go, oh, no, I always knew they were better. So the 2 examples I've got for you to show how extreme bandwagoning can be is Alliance and Roccat. So the beginning of the season, Roccat does really well. They get to the top of the league, I think, like the 3rd or 4th week in, and then they just held that spot for 3 weeks. They're doing awesome. So everyone was saying to me, you remember the discussion about Roccat we had? Roccat is the best team in Europe. They have the top 2 jungler, they have the top 2 mid lane, and the top 2 support player. And if I had said, come on, guys, can they have the top 3 in all those positions? Like, it's a bit ridiculous. No, they do. Look at it. They've won this game, this game, this game. Well, since then, Roccat has lost 7 games out of their last 9, which is insane. That's something like, I think that's like 23% win rate or something fucking terrible like that. I don't see any of those people who told me those guys were awesome. Like, yeah, I was wrong about Roccat. It turns out they actually don't have the top 3, but all those people have disappeared. They're hibernating for the winter. And in the exact same scenario, we got another scenario with Alliance. Alliance got the most hate I've ever seen a brand new lineup get, maybe ever in League of Legends. People just shitting all over. Wicked can never play top lane. Tabs is garbage, AD carry. Froggen, you're fucking terrible. There was people saying that Froggen, it's a myth that Froggen was even good outside of Season 2 and that in Season 3, he just looked okay because he had Snoopy and Crepo shot calling. Guys, can you please go back in time and slap the shit out of your faces? Like, what were you even talking about? This guy's the best mid laner in Europe. And so, in the same exact fashion, here's what's beautiful. So, Roccat are 2 for 7 in their last 9. Alliance are 7 for 2 in their last 9. They are the hottest team in the entire LCS EU, and they're dominating.
Yeah, it was funny. I was asked a while ago about what would my all-star team be, like before we really saw Alliance start playing in the LCS, and I put Froggen in the mid lane, and then people like just hated on me after that. Froggen. I was like, no, he's really good. Sometimes you don't have team synergy, and we talked about that, but it's part of it is like that teamwork, and they were a new team, and I do think that the team is solid. And I thought that from when I saw the roster and I first saw them playing, but it just took a while for them to develop that sense of cohesion and teamwork, and they're doing a lot better now. So,
well, especially as the funny thing was, everyone was talking like these results at the beginning of the season prove that they will never be good. Like these results are like, we'll take these first 8 games and we'll say, no, they cannot possibly be good because of these games. Well, the funny thing is, behind the scenes, here's another factor that I have like in an interview that's coming out. Someone says that even when they were losing every official LCS game, supposedly Alliance, part of their problem was they couldn't fix the problem because they had this insane scrim record where they were owning everyone. So if you win every scrim, how are you supposed to fix what's going wrong in all the LCS games? It's like a mental thing, or every time you practice what you want to do, it's working perfectly. That's the nightmare scenario for a coach, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and they, from what I understand from talking to the Alliance players, they did actually, they felt that way. That's how they expressed it personally to me too, where they were like, well, we just win so hard that we can't get a scrim past, 20 minutes because the other team just like GG's before then and we're on to the next scrim. So our late game rotations are not so hot. Now, who knows whether that's true or not. I never saw them scrim or anything like that. But who knows? Who knows? If that is the case.
You look at Froggen now, and I remember, because here's the thing, I have a good memory, guys. So if you guys talk bullshit, I'll remember it. And even if you subtly don't mention it again, I'll remember what the characterization was, okay? Because that's like how I think of my strength, is like how people characterized a team or a situation. So when I remember back to when Alliance was doing really badly and Roccat was doing awesome and Fnatic were top of the league and Gambit was still decent, I remember it used to go like this. Not only did people say Froggen was bad, but they said he can't be the best mid laner in Europe because Overpower is winning every game, SKT and Fnatic are awesome, and Alexic is Alexic, they're awesome. Well, everyone, let's be fair, everyone from that time period who said that, look at LCS EU now. Would you say any of those mid laners are better than Froggen right now? I don't think anyone would. Even people who think Overpower is still really good are still a bit questionable whether you could say he's better than Froggen. Maybe he could be a similar level. Alexic and SKT, we've already discussed at IEM, a bit shaky, not at the level we think of their names. There's no one left at mid lane. Bjergsen isn't coming back anytime soon, guys. It's Froggen. He's the best mid laner. So for me, it's like, I don't want to make it like one way or the other, like someone was an idiot before, now they have to hop on the bandwagon. Now, that's kind of the point I wanted to make here about bandwagoning, okay? It's not that you guys were wrong when you bandwagoned Roccat and bandwagoned against Alliance. It's that the concept of bandwagoning doesn't work because your sample size is too small. I made this tweet, I think, on Twitter. I forget if I said this, actually. The strength of a statement should be directly proportional to the sample size of the data that you have to analyze. So if I only have 3 games, okay, like Cloud9 versus Fnatic at this tournament, I said, okay, I thought Cloud9 did pretty well, Fnatic beat them a lot. I can't say those as really strong statements because I'd have to see them play more and I'd have to see them play maybe a best of 5 or something. Then I'd have a much better idea. Now, if a team's only played 4 or 5 games, I can make a trend, but I can't know for sure who's better, who's worse, and not in a way that I can extend that like extrapolate infinitely before if they'd have played and a year later if they play, you know. Now, if I have like a whole season and they've played 20 games, now I'm getting closer. Now I can get a good idea of what I'm doing. And if they played 5 tournaments, in fact, I used to say in Counter-Strike, every time there would be a fluke, everyone would get really mad if I said it was a fluke that this team won. And I would always say, let's judge them after 3 tournaments. So they get this one, they've won this one, okay, first in this one. Let's watch the second tournament. Okay, they came 5th to 8th. Maybe they had an off day. In the second tournament, if they come like 4th, well, now their actual level, if you average it out, is probably accurately about a semi-final level team. They weren't the best. That was a fluke. 5th to 8th, that was maybe a bad result. But overall, average it out and they come around 3rd to 4th, you'll usually find out that when you just do a simple analysis like that, it tends to be roughly correct. Like I always say, the numbers never lie. It's how you interpret them. If you don't know how to interpret them, you'll get the wrong answer.
Right. Well, and I mean, I suppose to flip that on me, you know, we only had 3 games of the KT Bullets in Masters after they made the round of 4 in OGN, and you could make a case, well, you know, that was only 3 games in Masters, and they were going through their roster changes, and is that indicative of their strength? You know, maybe it's not. We'll see coming up.
But I mean, I think this is a good example to apply it to, because people are going to do the same thing to you, okay? If you'd have said KTB would win, even when they were doing badly and they'd won, people would be like, oh, Monty's a genius, he knew it. They'd have bandwagoned there. And if you'd have said they would be really bad and they'd done really badly, they'd say that. So now people would expect, who think that you bandwagon, that you're now going to say, well, now that KT Billets has won, I'll pretend like that was the case. They were just getting ready and now they're a top team. No, that's the whole point. We're not bandwagoning. We're against all forms of bandwagoning. So in this case, yeah, KTB dominated that tournament. That doesn't, okay, I realize I'm going to break the heart of all you guys who do power rankings here. That doesn't make them the 3rd best team in the world. That just means maybe they move like 1 spot up or something. Because to me, I'm judging them against Korean competition anyway. So yeah, I think it probably hints at potential that they can now untap in the OGN real season, but I still wouldn't say that they're going to be the best Korean team. In fact, I would still put like Blaze ahead of them. I think Shield could questionably be ahead of them. I still would
I think they're still like 6th through 8th in terms of Korea, just because it was also the quality of the games. And, you know, it's my job to literally watch League of Legends all the time and be an expert in this game. So I watch their decision making in the game and I watch their gameplay and I'm like, this just isn't as clean. The decision making isn't quite as good as some of these other Korean teams right now. And it doesn't matter if they win every game in a tournament. It matters that the quality of their decision making and the quality of their play is living up. And when I just look at other Korean teams, and they split 1-1 with Samsung Blue tonight. I mean, we talk about that too. We'll see how they do. I mean, I agree that jury is still out on KT Bullets. Maybe they'll win this season. I don't know. I don't think so. I think that I would rank many Korean teams, like you said, Blaze, Samsung Blue gave them a run for the money. I think both Najin teams are better than them right now. SK Telecom is certainly better than them. KT Arrows are probably better than them. So,
I mean, and when you say Samsung Blue, for everyone who hasn't watched OGN, Samsung Blue lost the one player you knew on Samsung Blue, which is Pawn. They don't have that guy anymore. So it's not like even the one that beat SK Telecom. This is a different Samsung Blue, you know. Actually, the strange thing in Korea right now is, it's like, I think you've got SK Telecom number 1 for sure. Number 2, most people would agree, Blaze. But then positions 3rd to like 5th
8
is, wow, it's all over the place.
Well, like third through like 7th or even 3rd through 8th is kind of like a mess right now, actually.
I mean, I could even make the case. I think a team like SK Telecom S actually is surprisingly good.
See, I think so? Everyone else is like all on board, like loving S right now, and I don't think they're going to make it out of groups. I think KT Arrows are going to make it out of groups. So we'll see.
That's definitely possible. I think KT Arrows,
because I look at S and their wins are so like they have to like grind it out for an hour against Blaze in order to get a win, and then the next game Blaze comes and just trashes them in like 30 minutes, right? So it's like when S wins, it's this torturous process where they have to just like get it. It's just like they eventually through attrition like win in the ultra late game, but they're not really able at this in the same way to actually like get a big win. And Najin Blacksword just absolutely destroyed them the other day in Masters. So
as we were talking there about not very good games at IEM, let's talk about a very good game then. This is the show where we actually talk about League of Legends games that happened. And so this week, there was a wonderful game between SK Telecom K and Najin Shield. And
two games, two good games.
So this is the Shield where they've brought in Watch and No Fei retired. Now, if we just talk about Shield for a little bit, the funny thing about Shield was their star player was the jungler. He was the star player. He was the shot caller. He had the unique style. He seemed like the guy where if they're going to do well, he has to carry them. They made it all the way to the semis. They maybe almost made the finals. This seemed like, well, that was Shield's best chance to be really good. Then they move Watch over, Watch has always been a good jungler. But to me, I was like, what are you doing, Najin? Like, you just ruined your on paper better team, the Sword one. You've sort of done something weird with Shield now, and now you're bringing Helios into Sword. Like, oh god, what's going on here?
I know, but
that was a better move
really
for both
idea,
of them.
right?
Yeah, what happened, Monty?
Well, yeah, that's the weird thing about apparently Helios is actually like a hoodoo, like a really good shot caller,
Exactly.
and like fixed Sword really nicely because Sword was on paper that really strong team that lacked any kind of quality decision making. So you're like, look at these individual players, like great mechanics, great individual ability, but their team play was absolute garbage. And
their
now
understanding of objectives was bad as well. I mean, remember how many fucking games we would see Expression just farm on his own split push, and it wasn't winning them games, but he did it every time.
Yeah. And also, their pick and ban phase was pretty bad too. But now we see Najin Blacksword, and like all those problems are fixed. So now they're like these insanely good players. And Nagne has gotten, Nagne is an amazing mid laner now. So their decision making, their rotations have gotten way better. Limit, their new top laner, is solid, it appears. So I think that they're a very good team. And if we look at like Shield, it was so bizarre because in Najin there is this like on paper like extremely good individually talented team, and then Shield was this team that had like no playmakers in it but had good rotation. So they were like this weird like polar opposite in the same organization. And now, in the way that Sword has stepped up and finally found their shot calling, the individual players on Shield have stepped up and gotten actually, like, Goong is now like 4th in Challenger, like right behind Faker on the Challenger solo queue, and he's become this really good playmaker on Najin Shield that they needed in order to get like an advantage. Of course, Watch is an incredible mechanical jungler, so he brought Nofe. His one flaw was that his mechanics were not great. So now they have the shot calling with the early game mechanical jungler, and they're just like looking really good. And Save has stepped up as well. But
I mean, as a lead into this game here, if you were characterizing how SK Telecom S always wins his grind out long games, all those games last season that Shield won were the fucking dirtiest, ugliest games you've ever seen. They would win in like, but they would win. Their wins were like if two drunk guys outside an Irish pub were fighting, you know, like you would never say, well, he's an incredible boxer. Look at his technical skills there. He wins because they're both fucking just flailing and, you know, but they would win in this style. Okay, that was the way they won. It's completely changed this season. Now they're actually winning like a real team.
Oh, well, no. Shield had some good fast rotation wins last game where they won on some really, but they were kind of one dimensional where they used Caitlyn and Zephyr would play Caitlyn and then they just take all your outer towers and like methodically just like pick you down. But I would actually use that allegory towards Black Sword, where they're just like constantly just like throwing haymakers at you until like one of them actually manages to land. For me, that was like watching SK Telecom versus Najin Black Sword at Worlds, where, you know, Prey and Kane are like going crazy mechanically, and they just like keep like ambushing you and all this other shit. And they managed to drag Sword or SK Telecom to the 5th game and all this other stuff. But now, like, what's so funny to watch about Najin Shield is that they like use minions and they have these like crazy objective pushes where they force you to make really weird and hard decisions about how you're going to defend your base and how you're going to like defend the Baron at the same time. And their minions are like taking your Nexus turrets. I mean, they played a game against SK Telecom K where the minions killed both Nexus turrets from the bottom lane, and SKT K like had to fight for their life to get back into that game and had to make some very aggressive dives onto inhibitor towers in Shield's base to avoid just kind of losing this like minion wave war of attrition.
What about the game where Shield was like way behind SK Telecom? Like they were down like 1-5 in kills, then they were down like 1-9 in kills, they were down like 2-17 in kills or something.
Oh yeah.
How was that even possible? Like describe what you saw in that game, because that for SK Telecom K, that's a game they just close out and it's over, you know.
Well, no, they just Najin Shield is very good at applying pressure to objectives and being slippery on the map and like building up minion wave slow pushes that like take all your towers. So the thing is, yeah, they were down far behind in kills, but they were up in objectives. So Shield is a very strange team right now, and they're really fun to watch. And in fact, in the second game, because in Masters, after Shield barely lost to K, then both organizations decided to have a rematch of that same game. And Shield actually, until it was a very impressive team fight, and they're still not as good at team fighting as SK Telecom K, there was a very crucial team fight, but Shield was up 4K gold in the second game, and then there was a Dragon team fight that SK Telecom won and managed to snowball into a lead through some better scaling. And even the game that the first game that Shield nearly won, where they had the Nexus turrets down, Faker like had to hard carry that game in a very crucial 3v3 as Lulu, and he only died once at the very end when his team was taking down the Nexus that game. And it reminded me a lot of the KT Bullets game 3 from the Champions Winter semifinals, where SK Telecom was like on the ropes in game 3, and even though it was a 3-0 win for them, Faker had to hard carry on Riven. This game he had to hard carry on Lulu and have some insane plays in order just to keep his team in there. And that's like the power of Faker. Like that's why he's the best, right? Is because he's clutch. And even when his team should lose, he manages to make the important play that turns things around.
And everyone knows I've said this a million times, but everyone please shut the fuck up saying that Faker isn't the hard carry of SK Telecom K. Yeah, they're such a good team, he doesn't have to carry that often. Come on, man. He's the only player who can just go 1v5 in League of Legends at the moment, like almost any time he wants. As long as he doesn't have a really losing matchup, the danger's always there.
And Bengi, has tailored his style to help Faker shine. And yes, the team has been built around to help Faker, but there's a reason why it's been built that way. It's because Faker is the player who can come out and really carry. And Piglet's a great player as well, no doubt. But when push comes to shove, like there are games where SK Telecom K is down significantly, like when they played against Najin Shield, like in that game where he was playing Rivet against the KT Bullets from last season, where in any other situation, by all rights, they should have lost that game, and Faker's just like, nope, we're going to win now, and then they do. So,
I mean, the thing as well, okay, here's the question I want to ask you. After watching those games, so last week, I think it was, we discussed, like, are SK Telecom still the dominant force if they went to All-Stars, okay? Because we were discussing, like, well, changing one player you might still be the best, but you won't be the dominant team who won everything like they were with Pumandu, okay? From what you've seen of this SK Telecom right now, did that game make you think they have any holes that the other SK Telecom didn't? Is there any sort of, has their level come down at all?
Yeah, it has, I think, a little bit. I think that Casper isn't as good on as many champion. He just doesn't have the champion pool depth that Mondu has, and he does get caught out sometimes. So it is a little bit of a cause for concern for SKT fans out there. But who knows if we're pretending Mondu's not coming back, right? Mondu may come back. He's just like on medical hiatus right now. And so he said that depending on how the team does, that he may come back. He may have just needed a break. Like, who knows what the truth of that situation is. But if he comes back by the time that All-Stars rolls around, or if the team starts doing poorly and they're like, hey, Mondu, would you please come back now? And he might say yes. Who knows?
No, the weird thing is, like, you have to understand, the things that Koreans say officially can be very different from what's going on the planet.
Yeah,
so for example,
it's almost never the truth.
The official story was that he was too injured and he couldn't play. The guy's been playing solo queues, been streaming, like he's still been playing League of Legends, guys. It's whether or not he can go into that full practice cycle of like full on. Maybe that's the issue.
I think he needed a break. That's what I think. But I don't know if I'm not saying that's true. I haven't heard anything about that. But yes, he has been playing other games. He's been streaming WoW and like all this other stuff. And we'll see what happens, but I think he'll probably come back at some point. That's my opinion on the situation.
I even have an interesting anecdote about SK Telecom, the organization, in the context of giving him this break, okay, which is like this. One of the biggest problems they had in Brood War was that your salary, if you were a star player, was so high that they needed you for everything, okay? Even if you were going to play in the MSL final next week, if they have a Pro League game that's just a regular season game this week, well, you're the star player, so you have to play this week, and you have to practice for your MSL final, and you have to practice for the game you're going to play in the Pro League, okay? And it doesn't matter that you might need time off or you might need a bit of a break before you play the final. If you were the star player, unfortunately, they would just fill your schedule. You were overloaded the whole time. And if you were one of the best, you would play the required 12 hours, but then you'd play 4 hours extra because you want to keep up with Jaedong, you want to keep up with Flash. So unfortunately, that's why the history of Brood War individual players is players having their dominant run, and then not just dropping off to number 2, but dropping off hard. And usually they never came back. Only the really great players like the Flash or the Jaedongs could come back again and have a dominant period, right? Well, one of those great players was the player Bisu, who played for SK Telecom. Now, famously, he not only dropped off, when he would drop off, his confidence would get so hit that he would drop off to like losing like 8 games in a row in Pro League or something. This amazing player who could win an individual league would now be losing so hard that if they'd kept him with the old schedule, I think what happened was SK Telecom were the only team to learn this method, which is that with certain players, especially ones who are confidence-based, you have to almost like manage their confidence. So what they did is, twice in their history, they took him out of all team play. They didn't let him play in the Pro League. They told him, like, go away for a month. Like, just play for fun. You don't have to play any of the team practices. Then everyone else would think, oh, well, Bisu's done then, when he's out of practice for a month, how's he going to win? But every single time he came back a month later, he gradually was put back into the lineup. They gave him the easy matchups so he could win a few games, get it rolling. And every single time he came back to peak form and was at the absolute top again. And so what I think is interesting here is that SK Telecom were the only organization I ever saw of all the big ones, CJ, KT, who actually figured this was like a way you could manage guys not getting burned out.
Right.
So it's interesting to me because now it looks like this might be what they're doing with this Mandu guy. Because the temptation obviously is we're winning everything. No, don't worry about your problems now. Let's keep going till we lose. But the problem is that's where you're going to burn a guy out. And you're going to break him completely. Like if you then come 4th in the next season and he's really fucked up, that might be the end of his career. Whereas this is a way where maybe you can extend his career a bit.
Right. And not only that, but if we just look at what happens with champions, I mean, SK Telecom was so dominant that SK Telecom K is still going to do well, even if they have like a different support player right now. They're still, the favorites to get out of the group, the favorites to make a deep run in this tournament. They're still the team to beat. The only team that's beaten them is their sister team, even though now we've seen Shield come close. But the way that the circuit point system for Worlds works in Korea is that since K won a season, remember, the 3 teams that won the 3 seasons of champions last year all went to Worlds. Sword, Ozone, SK Telecom, right? So you get so many points for winning that if Mondo needs a break, they have 400 circuit points right now. They're probably going to be at Worlds next year. They're probably, just because the team is still good, they're going to take either one of the top 2 slots. So if he needs a break, you've pretty much locked in a seat at Worlds for all intents and purposes. And if you haven't, you can bring him back sooner. Otherwise, you can just you can let him take his break now and then have him come back before Worlds and then presumably do well again.
Well, no, this is if you were to plan it out, this would be the ideal time to take the break.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of topics actually in this show so far. I think actually on the next show we should agree in advance. Let's do like a discussion about TSM next time, I think. Everyone, first of all, every fucker watching this show wants us to talk about NA teams. And we've talked about Cloud9 a bit, we've talked about CLG. We haven't talked about TSM, so we've got to talk about them next time, Monty. We've got to watch our VODs, we're going to come and we're going to see if we can build a true anti-fan fan base or whether we'll give good analysis. What do you think?
It's going to happen either way. For the record, I do think that TSM is a good team, and I think that they are the best team in North America right now. And I see a lot more at TSM than most people because I see CLG scrims against TSM and all of that other stuff too. So I think TSM is solid. Do I think they're solid? We'll get into this next time. Do I think they're necessarily solid internationally? The results haven't shown it, but of course they are a slightly different team now, and they are at kind of the best they've ever been, really. I'm definitely. There's not a lot of argument that they're the best team in North America right now, in my opinion. So
the thing is, I can think of a few good ways we can do it as well, because everyone's had a discussion about how would TSM do. But the good thing is, because they have so many players from their classic lineup, We can talk about how they did in the past when they were on top in NA versus foreign teams. We can talk about Bjergsen, because everyone wants to know, what do you think of Bjergsen versus Faker versus Froggen? These are the topics people want to know, so I'm teasing everyone now. We will get into those next time. I think that's it for this show. Any final words, Monty?
No.